The soft amber light of Manhattan's finest restaurant can hide many things a trembling hand. A flash of recognition, a heart turning to stone, but it cannot hide the truth when it finally emerges, round and undeniable, beneath a simple black dress. Some say power is measured in dollars, others in the fear you inspire. But true power reveals itself in the moment everything is taken away, when the empire you've built on sand begins to shift beneath your feet. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but revenge carried within the womb that burns with the heat of creation itself. Tonight, across a crowded room of crystal and champagne, two worlds will collide. A man who thought he owned the future will face the past he discarded. A woman once silenced will find her voice in the most eloquent of ways. And when the check comes due, as it always does in this city of ambition and betrayal, someone will discover too late that some debts can never truly be paid. The soft amber lights of Le Bernardin cast elegant shadows across the finest china in Manhattan. David Chen, CEO of Nexus Technologies and one of New York's most eligible bachelors, raised his crystal flute of Krug champagne toward his companion. "To us," he said with practiced charm, his expensive watch glinting under the chandelier. At 38, David had mastered the art of appearing both powerful and casual, simultaneously designer suit perfectly tailored, dark hair styled with just the right amount of carelessness. Across the table, Olivia Parker's perfectly glossed lips curved into a smile. At 27, the fashion model represented everything David believed he deserved: beauty, youth, and the envious glances of everyone in the restaurant. "To us," she echoed, her voice carrying the affected cadence of someone perpetually aware they were being watched. "And to your brilliant acquisition, front page of the Wall Street Journal again." She tapped her phone where the notifications still displayed. "I already posted it on Instagram. The comments are flooding in." David nodded absently, accustomed to Olivia's constant social media documentation of their relationship. 6 months into dating, he'd grown to appreciate how her posts enhanced his public image, even if her obsession with her follower count occasionally irritated him. "The board was impressed with how quickly I closed the deal," David said, signaling the sommelier for another bottle. "They didn't think I could convince Westridge to sell before the quarter ended." "You can be very persuasive," Olivia purred, running a manicured finger along the stem of her glass. "It's one of the things I love about you." David smirked, savoring the moment. Everything was unfolding exactly as he had meticulously planned. His company's stock had doubled in the past year. His penthouse renovation was featured in Architectural Digest, and on his arm was a woman who appeared in last month's Vogue. He barely thought about Sophia anymore. The sommelier approached with their second bottle when David's attention caught on a familiar profile across the restaurant. His hand froze midair. It couldn't be, but it was. Sophia Chen, his ex-wife, was seated at a corner table, her face illuminated by candlelight. Even from this distance, David could recognize her delicate features, the graceful way she tilted her head when listening. She wore a simple black dress, her dark hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders longer than when they were married. What stopped his breath wasn't seeing her after 6 months of carefully crafted avoidance. It was the unmistakable roundness of her belly beneath the table as she shifted in her chair. Sophia was pregnant. "David, what's wrong?" Olivia's voice seemed to come from far away. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Nothing," he muttered, forcing his attention back to Olivia. "Thought I recognized someone from work," but his eyes betrayed him, drifting back to Sophia's table every few seconds. She hadn't noticed him yet. She was smiling, genuinely, smiling at her dinner companion. David's jaw tightened as he assessed the man sitting across from his ex-wife. Tall, distinguished, with silver temples that suggested he was older than David. The stranger wore a tailored suit that even from a distance David could tell cost thousands. The man leaned forward, saying something that made Sophia laugh, a warm, uninhibited laugh David hadn't heard in years. "David, seriously, what are you staring at?" Olivia twisted in her seat, following his gaze. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted Sophia. Isn't that your ex, the boring one who couldn't handle your success? David didn't answer. His mind was racing through calculations. 6 months since the divorce, Sophia looked at least 7 months pregnant, which meant she got fat, Olivia remarked dismissively, turning back to her truffle risotto. I heard that happens when women hit their mid-30s. Their metabolism just, she's pregnant. David cut her off, his voice oddly hollow. Olivia's fork clattered against her plate. Pregnant. But you said she couldn't. I know what I said, David snapped, memories flooding back unbidden. You're useless as a wife, David had shouted that night, champagne and success making him cruel. Their living room, filled with his colleagues and business partners, had fallen silent. 3 years of marriage and not even a pregnancy. What's the point of you? Sophia had stood there, humiliation coloring her cheeks as 20 pairs of eyes watched her husband dismember their marriage in public. Perhaps, she had replied, her voice barely audible. If you were home more than 2 nights a month, biology might have a fighting chance. That had been the end. He'd ordered her out of their home that night, tossing her suitcase onto the driveway while security watched impassively. The divorce had been quick, brutal, and thanks to the ironclad prenup and his team of attorneys, extraordinarily favorable to David. Now, watching Sophia radiate a quiet happiness across the restaurant, something unfamiliar twisted in David's chest. Is it yours? Olivia's question sliced through his thoughts. Don't be ridiculous, David replied automatically. We were having problems for a long time before the divorce. But doubt crept in like a winter draft. He and Sophia had still shared a bed occasionally, right up until the final month. He'd been so certain she couldn't conceive he'd thrown that failure in her face countless times during their arguments. The waiter appeared with their entrees, but David had lost his appetite. Across the restaurant, the silver-haired man reached across the table and placed his hand over Sophia's. The tender gesture sent a jolt of possessiveness through David that caught him entirely off guard. Who's the guy? He asked, trying to sound casual. Olivia rolled her eyes. How would I know some rebound? Obviously, probably old enough to be her father. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. Though I have to say, for someone so ordinary, she certainly upgraded in the wallet department. That's a Patek Philippe watch he's wearing. Limited edition. David's eyes narrowed. He prided himself on being an excellent judge of character and success. The stranger exuded quiet confidence, the kind that came from old money or sustained achievement, not the desperate social climbing David often saw in Manhattan's elite circles. I'm going to the restroom, David announced abruptly, standing. Now our food just arrived. I'll be back in a minute. David took a circuitous route through the restaurant, timing his path to pass near Sophia's table. As he approached, he caught fragments of their conversation. Just the preliminary paperwork, the stranger was saying, his voice carrying the polished accent of someone who had attended the right schools. The board will make their final decision next week, but it's essentially a formality at this point. That's wonderful news, Michael, Sophia replied, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. I know how much work you've put into this. David slowed his pace, straining to hear more without being obvious. It's all thanks to your strategic insight, the man Michael responded. The presentation you prepared convinced them immediately. I told you you'd be perfect for... David must have lingered too long because Michael glanced up, his eyes meeting David's. There was a flicker of recognition, then something else, something that looked unsettlingly like amusement. Sophia followed Michael's gaze and froze when she saw David. For one unguarded moment, a complex mixture of emotions crossed her face: surprise, discomfort, and perhaps a flash of old pain. Then, just as quickly, her expression smoothed into perfect neutrality. She turned back to Michael as if David were nothing more than another restaurant patron passing by. The dismissal stung more than David would have expected. He continued to the restroom, his mind churning. In the privacy of the marble-lined men's room, he braced his hands against the sink and stared at his reflection. The face that looked back at him, The face that had graced the cover of Business Insider last month seemed suddenly unfamiliar. When he returned to his table, Olivia was scrolling through her phone, their meals growing cold. "You'll never believe what I just found," she said without looking up. "Your ex-wife is working for Meridian Systems now. They just announced her as their new director of strategic partnerships." She turned her phone to show him a LinkedIn post. "Isn't that one of your competitors?" David's stomach dropped. Meridian Systems was indeed a competitor, a rapidly growing one that had been stealing key clients from Nexus over the past quarter. "She was just a kindergarten teacher when you met her." "Right," Olivia continued, her tone deliberately casual yet probing. "Quite a career change." "She had a business degree," David said automatically, "before she decided teaching was her calling or whatever." The truth was more complicated. Sophia had graduated top of her class from Wharton, had been working at a prestigious consulting firm when they met. She'd switched to teaching after they married, when his own career demanded constant relocation. He'd been relieved at the time her flexibility had enabled his rise without competition at home. "Well, apparently she's quite good at her new job," Olivia said, scrolling further. "This Michael Harrison she's with, he's Meridian's chief legal officer. Harvard Law, former partner at Sullivan and Cromwell." She looked up at David with perfectly feigned innocence. "Didn't you try to hire him last year?" David had indeed tried to recruit Michael Harrison. The man had politely declined what had been an extremely generous offer. The connection to Sophia was too coincidental to ignore. As their dinner progressed, David found himself unable to focus on Olivia's chatter about Fashion Week and celebrity gossip. His attention kept drifting to Sophia's table, watching the easy rapport between her and Harrison. They looked comfortable together, like they had known each other for years. When Sophia and Michael finally stood to leave, David watched them weave through the tables toward the exit. As they passed, Michael nodded politely in David's direction, a knowing smile playing at his lips. Sophia didn't acknowledge him at all, keeping her eyes forward, one hand resting protectively over her rounded belly. "Well, that was awkward," Olivia commented as the pair disappeared through the doors. "Though I have to say, pregnancy hasn't been kind to her figure. That dress did nothing for her." David didn't respond. The sight of Sophia's pregnant form had stirred something primitive within him, a question he couldn't shake. Was that his child? The timing made it possible, and if it was, why hadn't she told him? "Let's get the check," he said suddenly. "But we haven't had dessert," Olivia protested. "I need to go." The drive back to his penthouse was silent, Olivia sulking beside him in the Ferrari. He dropped her at her apartment with a distracted kiss and a vague excuse about an early meeting. Alone in his penthouse, David poured himself 2 fingers of 30-year-old Macallan and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park. The view had cost him millions, but tonight it provided no satisfaction. He pulled out his phone and did what he'd resisted doing for months. He searched for Sophia online. Her LinkedIn profile had indeed been updated. Director of Strategic Partnerships at Meridian Systems, a position she'd held for 4 months. Before that, nothing. The 6-month gap after their divorce when she had seemingly disappeared. He switched to Instagram, where he found her profile set to private. The profile picture showed her in profile, her pregnancy visible but her face turned slightly away from the camera. He felt an irrational surge of anger that she was sharing this pregnancy with the world while keeping it from him. David scrolled through his contacts and found the number of the private investigator he occasionally used for corporate background checks. "I need information," he said when the man answered. "Everything you can find on Sophia Chen and her connection to Michael Harrison at Meridian Systems, and..." He hesitated. "I need to know about her pregnancy." "When she's due, any medical records you can access?" "That's sensitive territory," the investigator replied cautiously. "Medical records are double your usual rate." David interrupted. "I need this quickly." After hanging up, David stood at the window for a long time, watching the city lights blur through the amber lens of his whiskey glass. The life he had so carefully constructed, the life he had discarded Sophia to achieve, suddenly felt hollow, like a stage set that would collapse at the slightest touch. His phone chimed with a text from Olivia, a selfie of her pouting in lingerie with the caption, "Missing you already." He didn't respond. Instead, his mind kept returning to the image of Sophia, pregnant and glowing, laughing with Michael Harrison. For the first time since their divorce, David wondered if he had made a catastrophic mistake. 6 months earlier, Sophia had stood in the rain outside the luxury high-rise she had called home for 3 years, a security guard hovering uncomfortably nearby as she tried to fit 3 years of marriage into two hastily packed suitcases. "Mrs. Chen," the guard had begun. "It's Ms. Wu now," she had corrected him quietly, reverting to her maiden name with a finality that surprised even her. "Or it will be, once the papers are signed." "Ms. Wu," he amended awkwardly. "I can call you a car." "Thank you, James, but I've already ordered an Uber." She had smiled at him. This man who had greeted her every morning for 3 years, and who now was under orders to ensure she left and never returned. The divorce had been swift and brutal. David had been preparing for it far longer than Sophia had realized, moving assets, documenting her every perceived failure as a wife. The prenuptial agreement she had signed naive and in love at 29 had left her with virtually nothing except a small settlement that would barely cover a few months' rent in Manhattan. Her first night alone, in a sterile, extended-stay hotel that smelled of industrial cleaner. Sophia had curled into a ball and allowed herself exactly 1 hour of tears. Then she had opened her laptop and begun to plan. 2 weeks later, exhausted from vomiting every morning, a symptom she initially attributed to stress, Sophia had stared in disbelief at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. 3 more tests had confirmed the impossible after years of failed attempts, and David's constant recriminations about her barren state. She was pregnant. Her first instinct had been to tell David. Surely this would change everything. Then she remembered his cruel words at the company party, the way he had publicly humiliated her, the coldness in his eyes as he'd watched her pack her life into suitcases. "No," she had whispered to her still flat stomach. "He doesn't deserve to know you." The decision made, Sophia had methodically erased her digital footprint, closed her social media accounts, and moved into a modest studio apartment paid for in cash. She had reached out to exactly one person from her past life, her former college roommate, now a gynecologist, who agreed to treat her pregnancy off the books. For 3 months, Sophia had lived like a ghost, working remotely as a curriculum consultant while she plotted her next move. She had carefully documented everything from her marriage, the financial records David thought she couldn't access, the emails to his attorneys, the recordings of his verbal abuse on nights when too much scotch had loosened his control. It was during this period of self-imposed isolation that Sophia had received an unexpected email from Michael Harrison. "I hope this message finds you well." It had read, "We met briefly at the Wharton alumni dinner 3 years ago. I recently heard about your situation and would like to discuss a potential opportunity at Meridian Systems. Your background in strategic planning would be valuable to us. Perhaps we could meet for coffee." Sophia had nearly deleted it, suspicious of any connection to her past life. But something about the message, its professional tone, the lack of pity had appealed to her. She had agreed to meet Michael at a quiet cafe in Brooklyn, far from David's usual haunts. Michael had been surprisingly easy to talk to. At 45, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. He had recognized her value immediately, offering her a position that would utilize her business acumen rather than the teaching career she had adopted to accommodate David's ambitions. "Why are you really offering me this job?" Sophia had asked directly, protective hands resting on her small but visible baby bump. "Is this some corporate espionage attempt to get information on Nexus?" Michael had smiled, respect evident in his eyes. "Frankly, yes, your knowledge of Nexus is an asset, but that's not why I reached out." He had paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Let's just say David Chen has burned many bridges in this industry. When I heard how he treated you, I saw an opportunity to right a wrong while also strengthening our company. Revenge as a business strategy," Sophia had raised an eyebrow. I prefer to think of it as karmic rebalancing with excellent ROI potential. Michael had replied with a wry smile. Besides, your resume speaks for itself. Wharton MBA, McKinsey experience. Nexus's loss is our gain. Sophia had accepted the position. Within 3 months, she had risen from strategic consultant to director of strategic partnerships. Her natural business acumen flourishing in an environment that valued her contributions. Her pregnancy, rather than being viewed as an inconvenience, was celebrated by her new colleagues. And Michael had become more than a boss. He had become a friend, a confidant, and eventually, as her belly grew along with her confidence, something more. He never pressed, never rushed, respecting the emotional wounds that were still healing. But his steady presence in her life had been a revelation after years with David. Now, as their car pulled away from Le Bernardin, Sophia finally released the breath she'd been holding since seeing David. You okay? Michael asked, his hand finding hers in the darkened back seat. Yes, she said, surprised to find it was true. That was unexpected, but I'm fine. He couldn't take his eyes off you, Michael observed, especially this little one. He gently placed his hand on her rounded belly. Sophia smiled as the baby kicked in response. I've been dreading that moment for months, wondering what I'd feel when I saw him again. She looked out at the passing city lights. But when it happened, I felt nothing. Just nothing. Michael studied her face. You didn't tell him about the baby. It wasn't a question, but Sophia answered anyway. No, and I'm not going to. He'll find out eventually. New York is too small a city. I know, Sophia sighed. But by then, I'll be ready. We'll be ready. She ran a protective hand over her belly. I won't let him anywhere near this child. Michael, not after what he did. Michael nodded, understanding the steel beneath her quiet words. The board was impressed with your presentation today. The partnership with Takashi Industries is practically finalized. You've become indispensable to Meridian in just a few months. Speaking of the Takashi deal, Sophia said, gratefully shifting to business, did you notice that David seemed to recognize you? Of course. He tried to recruit me last year. Michael's mouth quirked into a half smile. Offered me an obscene amount of money. Why didn't you tell me? Didn't seem relevant at the time. And later, he squeezed her hand. I didn't want you to think my interest in you had anything to do with corporate rivalry. The car pulled up to Sophia's building, a modest but comfortable doorman apartment in Chelsea, a far cry from the luxury high-rise she had shared with David. But hers, entirely hers. Would you like to come up? She asked, the question still new enough to carry a charge of nervous anticipation. Michael's smile was warm. I'd like that very much. As they entered her apartment, Sophia's phone buzzed with a notification. A new email from their corporate security team marked urgent. She opened it, her face growing serious as she read. What is it? Michael asked. Someone's trying to access my medical records. She looked up at him, eyes hardening. 3 guesses who? Michael took out his own phone. I'll alert our security team to strengthen your privacy protections. We have protocols for this. Sophia set her phone down, a cold determination settling over her. So it begins. Are you worried? Michael asked, searching her face. No, Sophia replied, surprising herself with the truth of it. I'm ready. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling her child, her daughter, move beneath her palms. We both are. By the time Monday morning arrived, David had barely slept. The image of Sophia pregnant, successful, apparently happy had carved itself into his consciousness, refusing to grant him peace. He arrived at the Nexus Technologies headquarters earlier than usual, dismissing his assistant's attempts to review his schedule. Get me everything we have on Meridian Systems, he ordered instead. Financial reports, client lists, personnel files, everything. Sir, some of that information might not be. Just do it, he snapped, closing his office door. Within the hour, his desk was covered with reports and his email inbox filled with forwarded files. David immersed himself in Meridian's business operations with an intensity that surprised even him. The company had been on his radar as a mid-level competitor, but he had dismissed them as insignificant compared to Nexus's market dominance. The reports told a different story. Under new leadership, Meridian had been steadily gaining ground, securing partnerships with key Asian tech firms and poaching several major clients from Nexus in recent months. One name appeared repeatedly in the successful initiative's Sophia Chen, Director of Strategic Partnerships. The latest report detailed a pending deal with Takashi Industries, a Japanese conglomerate David had been courting for over a year. His phone rang. The private investigator. "What do you have?" David demanded, forgoing any greeting. "Quite a bit, actually. Your ex-wife has been busy." The investigator's voice was professionally detached. "She's approximately 32 weeks pregnant, due in about 2 months. Based on the timing, conception would have occurred shortly before your separation." David's grip tightened on the phone. "You're certain? Medical records don't lie. And before you ask, yes, it could be yours. There's no father listed on any of her prenatal documentation." The confirmation sent a shockwave through David. A child. His child. The heir he had always wanted. Growing inside the woman he had discarded. What about her relationship with Harrison? They appear to have a personal relationship that developed after she joined Meridian. They've been seen dining together, attending industry events. He's been accompanying her to some medical appointments for the past 2 months. David's jaw clenched. "What else?" "This is where it gets interesting," the investigator said. "Ms. Chen has been systematically documenting your marriage for some time. She has recordings of conversations, copies of financial transactions, emails. Quite a comprehensive file." How do you know this?" "She's been storing everything on a secure cloud server. Not easy to access, but not impossible." There was a pause. "Mr. Chen, I should warn you if this information were to become public or be presented in a legal setting. It could be problematic for you." David felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. "What kind of recordings?" "Arguments mostly. Some where you appear to be not at your best. Discussing methods of hiding assets before the divorce. Conversations with your attorney about leveraging her emotional state to get a favorable settlement." "Jesus Christ," David muttered, memories flashing of late nights. Too much scotch. Phone calls he thought were private. "There's more," the investigator continued. "She's been meeting with other former Nexus employees, people who left under difficult circumstances." David knew exactly who those would be. The VP of sales he'd fired after taking credit for her market expansion strategy. The CTO who'd been pushed out when he objected to certain data practices. The administrative assistant who'd filed a sexual harassment complaint that David's legal team had buried with a settlement and an NDA. "Is she building a case against me?" David asked, the question burning in his throat. "Hard to say. Could be corporate intelligence gathering. Could be something more personal." The investigator paused. "One more thing you should know. Michael Harrison isn't just Meridian's chief legal officer. His father is William Harrison." David closed his eyes, the implications hitting him immediately. William Harrison was one of the most powerful venture capitalists in New York, a kingmaker in the tech industry with a reputation for playing hardball. "William Harrison is also one of your major shareholders, correct?" the investigator asked unnecessarily. They both knew the answer. After ending the call, David sat motionless at his desk, the morning sun casting long shadows across the reports scattered before him. The carefully constructed narrative of his life's successful entrepreneur, ruthless businessman, Manhattan's most eligible bachelor was unraveling like a cheap suit. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Chen, Ms. Parker is here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent." David suppressed a groan. "Send her in." Olivia swept into his office like a perfumed hurricane. designer heels clicking aggressively on the marble floor. "You haven't answered any of my texts since Saturday night," she accused without preamble. "I've been busy. Olivia, some of us have companies to run." Her eyes narrowed at his tone. "This is about her. Isn't it your pregnant ex-wife?" She spat the words like they tasted bitter. "I saw how you looked at her." "This isn't a good time," David said, standing. "I have meetings all day." "Don't dismiss me like I'm one of your employees," Olivia hissed, her carefully constructed socialite persona cracking. "We had an agreement. David, I play the devoted girlfriend, boost your image, accompany you to those boring corporate events, and you provide the lifestyle and connections I need." David felt a flash of irritation. Their relationship had indeed been transactional from the start, her youth and beauty exchanged for his wealth and influence. It had seemed like an efficient arrangement 6 months ago. "Nothing has changed," he said, trying to placate her. "Everything has changed." Olivia's voice rose dangerously. "You're obsessed with her now. I saw you searching her name on your phone at dinner before you shut me out." David hadn't realized Olivia was so observant. It was an unsettling revelation. "Look," he said, switching tactics. "I'm dealing with a potential corporate situation involving Meridian Systems. Sophia works there now. That's all." Olivia wasn't buying it. "Is the baby yours?" she demanded. The bluntness of the question caught him off guard. "That's none of your business." Her perfectly made-up face contorted with anger. "It absolutely is my business. Do you know what the tabloids would do with this tech CEO abandons pregnant wife, flaunts model girlfriend? My reputation would be ruined." "Your reputation?" David laughed incredulously. "You were a catalog model for department stores before you met me. I made you relevant." It was the wrong thing to say. Olivia's eyes went cold. "You arrogant bastard," she said quietly. "You think you're the only one who knows how to gather leverage. I have recordings too." "David, all those pillow talk moments when you bragged about manipulating stock prices, the cocaine at the Hamptons house last month, the real reason the sexual harassment suit against your CTO disappeared." She smiled thinly. "I'm not just a pretty face." David stared at her, reassessing everything about their relationship. "What do you want?" "Olivia, what I've always wanted. Security. Status." She adjusted her designer handbag on her arm. "I want a formal announcement of our engagement in the Times. I want my name added to the Hamptons property, and I want a generous prenup." Her smile turned predatory. "Considerate insurance for us both. You're insane if you think I'll marry you. Then I hope you're prepared for what happens next." She turned toward the door, then paused. "You have until the end of the week to decide. Otherwise, I'll take my recordings to someone who'll appreciate them more. Perhaps your ex-wife's new company." After she left, David sank back into his chair, his mind racing. Threats from all sides. Sophia with evidence of his personal misconduct. Olivia with evidence of potentially criminal business practices. And somewhere in the middle of it all, his child who would be born into this toxic web he'd created. His intercom buzzed again. "Mr. Chen, the board is assembled in the conference room for the quarterly review." David straightened his tie, compartmentalizing as he'd always done. Deal with one crisis at a time. He gathered the reports on Meridian and headed to the conference room, where 12 expectant faces turned toward him. "Gentlemen," he began with practiced confidence, "before we review our quarterly performance, I need to discuss a developing situation with Meridian Systems." Serene demurred. Sophia eased her pregnant body into the ergonomic chair in Michael's office, gratefully accepting the herbal tea he offered. "The security team confirmed it," Michael said, closing the door. "Someone hired a PI to access your medical records and personal files. They've also been monitoring your cloud storage." Sophia nodded, unsurprised. "What did they get?" "Not much from your medical records, thanks to the extra encryption we implemented. But they did access enough to confirm your pregnancy timeline." Michael hesitated. "They may have seen some of your documentation about David as well." Good, Sophia said calmly. I want him to know I have everything. Michael studied her carefully. This isn't just about corporate strategy anymore, is it? Sophia placed her hands on her swollen belly, feeling her daughter kick vigorously. It never was. Not really. She met Michael's gaze steadily. I didn't plan to get pregnant, but when I did, everything changed. I realized I couldn't just walk away and start over. Not when David's behavior could go unchecked. Not when he could potentially do to others what he did to me. You're building a case against him. I'm ensuring my daughter will never be vulnerable to him, Sophia corrected. The recordings, the documentation, they're my insurance policy. If David tries to claim paternity or threaten us in any way, I have everything I need to protect us legally. Michael nodded slowly. And the corporate angle Meridian benefiting from your knowledge of Nexus's operations? Business is business, Sophia said with a small smile. David taught me that, if nothing else. My father called this morning, Michael said, changing tactics. Apparently David reached out to him directly, suggesting a private meeting. Sophia raised an eyebrow. William knows about us. About our relationship, yes. About the baby potentially being David's, no. That's your private business. Not for much longer, I suspect. Sophia sipped her tea thoughtfully. David will have confirmed the timing by now. He'll make a move soon. What do you think he'll do? If I were still the woman he married, he'd try to charm me, claim he'd made a mistake, that he wants to be part of his child's life. Sophia's voice hardened. But he knows that won't work now, so he'll try to intimidate me, use his power and connections. We have considerable power and connections ourselves, Michael reminded her. Yes, we do. Sophia's phone chimed with a calendar alert. The Takashi Industries conference call starts in 10 minutes. Shall we? As they walked to the conference room, Sophia felt a strange calm. 6 months ago, she had been broken, humiliated, alone. Now, she moved through the halls of Meridian with confidence, her achievements recognized, her future secure. Whatever David planned, she was ready. The Takashi call went exceptionally well. Sophia's fluent Japanese, a skill David had always dismissed as irrelevant, proved crucial in securing final terms, advantageous to both companies. When the call ended, the Meridian team broke into spontaneous applause. That's how you close a deal, the CEO announced, beaming at Sophia. The Takashi partnership will transform our Asian market presence completely. As the team filed out, congratulating her, Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. About the baby. About everything. Please, Sophia. David. She showed the message to Michael, who frowned. How did he get your new number? He has resources, Sophia said, deleting the message without responding. It doesn't matter. But the text continued throughout the day. I know I don't deserve your time, but this is important. Is it a boy or a girl? I have a right to know my own child. By evening, the tone had shifted. You can't keep my child from me. We both know the courts will side with me. Do you really want to go up against my legal team? Think about what's best for the baby. Sophia blocked the number, but was unsurprised when an email arrived minutes later. Meet me tomorrow, the Pierre Hotel, 2 p.m., private suite. Come alone. This is your only chance to resolve this amicably. She forwarded the email to Michael and their security team, then rubbed her temples. Feeling the beginning of a headache, her phone rang. Michael, don't even think about meeting him alone, he said without preamble. I wasn't planning to, Sophia assured him, but we can't ignore him forever. Let me handle this. I'll meet with him. No, Sophia said firmly. This is my battle, but I won't fight it on his terms. She thought for a moment. Tell your father to accept David's meeting request. Let's see what he has to say to William Harrison. Michael was quiet for a moment. You're suggesting we let my father be your proxy? I'm suggesting we use every strategic advantage we have. William is a major Nexus shareholder with significant influence over David's board. David will have to watch his words carefully. My father can be ruthless in business, Michael warned. So can I, Sophia replied, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. Besides, it's time William knew everything. If he's going to be this child's grandfather even unofficially, he should understand what we're dealing with. There was a pause on the line, and when Michael spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. You see us as family. Yes, Sophia said simply. I do. After they hung up, Sophia moved to her apartment window, looking out at the city lights. Her daughter kicked vigorously, as if sensing her mother's determination. It's okay, little one, she whispered, stroking her belly. We're not alone anymore, and we're not afraid. The conference room at William Harrison's private office in the MetLife building exuded old-world power. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, and a view of Manhattan that reminded everyone in the room just who controlled the commanding heights of the economy. David had arrived 15 minutes early, hoping for a few moments alone with the venture capital titan, only to find William already seated at the head of the table, reviewing documents with Michael at his side. David! William greeted him without standing, his handshake firm but brief. At 70, William Harrison remained an imposing figure, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, with a lean physique of a man half his age. I understand you have concerns about Meridian Systems. David took a seat, acutely aware that this meeting was already not proceeding as he had planned. My concerns are both professional and personal, he began carefully. Let's start with the professional, William suggested, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. For 20 minutes, David outlined his concerns about potential corporate espionage, emphasizing Sophia's access to proprietary Nexus information and the suspicious timing of Meridian's recent successes. William listened impassively, occasionally glancing at notes Michael provided. When David finished, the older man leaned back in his chair. Interesting, William said. Now let me offer a different perspective. Meridian Systems has grown its market share through superior strategic planning, and by treating its partners with respect, something Nexus has failed to do consistently. He slid a folder across the table. These are testimonials from former Nexus clients who switched to Meridian. Note the recurring themes: arrogance, inflexibility, and a failure to listen. David left the folder untouched. With respect, Mr. Harrison, and client management isn't why I requested this meeting. No, William agreed. You wanted to discuss Sophia Chen and her pregnancy. The bluntness caught David off guard. I have reason to believe the child is mine. The timing would suggest that possibility, William acknowledged. What exactly are you proposing? David, I want access to my child, shared custody, a role in his or her life. Michael, who had been silent until now, raised an eyebrow. Interesting that you frame this as concern for the child. Given your treatment of its mother, David felt a flash of anger. My relationship with Sophia is complicated. Not from where I sit, William interjected. You publicly humiliated a pregnant woman, whether you knew of the pregnancy or not, threw her out of her home, used your considerable resources to ensure she received almost nothing in the divorce, and then attempted to sabotage her professional reputation. David stared at the older man. You seem very well informed about my private affairs. I make it my business to be well informed about everything that affects my investments, William replied coolly. Nexus Technologies is still one of my portfolio companies for now, and Sophia Chen is a valued executive at another of my investments. More importantly, she is carrying my grandchild. The statement hung in the air for a moment before David processed its full meaning. He looked at Michael, understanding dawning. You and Sophia are building a life together, Michael finished for him. A life that includes her child. My child, David insisted, his voice hardening. Biologically, perhaps, William conceded. Legally and morally, that remains to be seen. David leaned forward. I have rights. You have potential claims that would need to be adjudicated, William corrected. claims that would be weighed against considerable evidence of your unsuitability as a parent. What evidence? Michael opened a laptop and pressed play. David's own voice filled the room, slurred but recognizable, raging at Sophia during what he recognized as their final argument. You're fucking worthless as a wife? Can't even do the one thing you're supposed to do, give me a goddamn heir. Get out of my house. David felt the blood drain from his face. Where did you get that way? Sophia recorded many of your interactions, Michael said calmly, purely for her protection, which proved prescient. William picked up the thread. There are hours of similar recordings. David, financial documents showing how you hid assets before the divorce. Witness statements from household staff regarding your treatment of Sophia. The older man's gaze was clinical, assessing. How do you think a family court judge would view this evidence? David's mind raced. His legal team was the best money could buy, but even they couldn't make this kind of evidence disappear. And William Harrison had the influence to ensure the case wouldn't be buried. What do you want? David asked finally. It's not about what we want, William replied. It's about what's best for the child and its mother. Here's what's going to happen, Michael said, sliding a document across the table. You're going to sign this agreement. It establishes a trust for the child's education and health care, to which you'll contribute an appropriate amount annually. In return, you waive all parental rights and claims. You can't be serious, David said, not touching the document. Completely serious, William assured him. Additionally, you will cease all attempts to access Sophia's personal information, medical records, or to contact her directly. Any necessary communication will go through our attorneys. And if I refuse, William's smile didn't reach his eyes, then we take this matter public. The recordings, the financial improprieties, the witness statements, all of it becomes part of a very public legal battle, one that would almost certainly trigger SEC investigations into some of Nexus's more creative accounting practices. You're blackmailing me, David said incredulously. I'm offering you a business solution to a problem you created, William corrected. One that allows you to maintain your public image and corporate position while providing for your biological child. The board would never allow you to damage Nexus this way, David argued. You're a major shareholder. The board has already been briefed on the situation, William revealed. Hypothetically, of course. They've indicated they would accept your resignation rather than weather a public scandal of this magnitude. David felt as if the floor were tilting beneath him. You went to my board behind my back. I exercised my fiduciary responsibility to protect my investment, William replied. The board agrees that your personal conduct has created unacceptable risk for the company. David stared at the document before him, mind racing through scenarios. Each potential move he considered was already blocked. William and Michael had outmaneuvered him completely. I want to see Sophia, he said finally, to discuss this face-to-face. She has no interest in seeing you, Michael replied, but she has authorized us to negotiate on her behalf. This isn't a negotiation, David observed bitterly. It's an ultimatum. Call it what you like, William said, standing to indicate the meeting was concluding. You have 48 hours to sign the agreement. After that, our more public approach begins. He gathered his papers. I suggest you consult with your attorneys. David, they'll tell you this is the best offer you're going to get. After they left, David remained seated in the empty conference room. The unsigned agreement before him, like a death warrant for the future, he had suddenly, desperately begun to want a future that included the child he hadn't known existed until days ago. His phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Have you made your decision yet? Time's running out. David closed his eyes, feeling the walls closing in from all sides. The following morning, Sophia arrived at Meridian to find a lavish flower arrangement on her desk: roses, lilies, and orchids in a crystal vase that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The card read simply, "Please call me. We need to talk." She took a photo of the arrangement and texted it to Michael with the caption, "Apparently we've moved to the charm offensive phase." His reply came seconds later. "Want me to have security remove it?" No need. The team will enjoy these in the break room. She picked up the vase and carried it to the communal kitchen, leaving it on the center table without the card. Her assistant intercepted her on the way back to her office. Ms. Chen, there's a courier delivery that requires your signature. The package contained legal documents in a heavy cream envelope bearing the logo of David's attorneys. Inside was a modified version of the agreement Michael had presented, with substantial changes to the terms. A sticky note in David's handwriting read, "My counteroffer. Please consider it. This doesn't have to be adversarial." Sophia forwarded the documents to Michael and their legal team without reading further. Whatever game David was playing, she refused to engage directly. Throughout the day, the deliveries continued. Gourmet chocolates, a cashmere baby blanket from Hermes, a vintage first edition of her favorite book, a detail from their early courtship that she was surprised he remembered. Each gift came with the same request: talk to me. By late afternoon, Sophia was exhausted by the emotional manipulation behind each delivery. She was considering leaving early when her phone rang with a call from the building's security desk. "Ms. Chen, there's a David Chen here insisting on seeing you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's quite persistent." Sophia's heart raced. "I don't want to see him. Please escort him out." "We're trying, ma'am, but he's causing a scene. He's threatening to stay in the lobby until you come down." She closed her eyes, considering her options. "Give me 5 minutes." Sophia called Michael immediately. "David's in the lobby, making a spectacle of himself." "I'm on my way," Michael said instantly. "Don't go down there alone." "Too late. Building security is overwhelmed, and I can't have him disrupting the entire office." She took a deep breath. "I'll meet him in the public atrium. Plenty of witnesses, security cameras. He won't try anything there." "Sophia, I need to do this." "Michael, he'll keep escalating until I face him." She gathered her resolve. "But have legal on standby. And if I'm not back in 15 minutes, come find me." The elevator ride to the lobby felt interminable. Sophia used the time to center herself, one hand resting protectively on her belly. She had spent months afraid of this confrontation, but now that it was imminent, she found herself surprisingly calm. David stood in the center of the atrium, still impeccably dressed in a designer suit, but with an uncharacteristic dishevelment, his tie slightly askew, a day's stubble on his usually clean-shaven face. When he saw her, his expression cycled rapidly through surprise, relief, and something that looked disturbingly like possessiveness as his eyes fixed on her pregnant belly. "Sophia," he said, taking a step toward her. She raised a hand to stop him. "That's close enough." He halted, visibly struggling to control his emotions. "You're beautiful." "What do you want?" "David," Sophia asked, keeping her voice steady. "To talk. Somewhere private. We have nothing to discuss that can't be said right here." She gestured to the busy atrium around them, where curious onlookers were already beginning to notice the tension between them. David ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "For God's sake, Sophia, you're carrying my child. At least give me the courtesy of a private conversation." "You lost the right to any courtesy from me the night you threw me out of our home," Sophia replied evenly. "Whatever you have to say it quickly. I have work to do." He took a deep breath. "The agreement your lawyers presented is unacceptable. I want to be part of my child's life. I have that right. Rights are earned. David, they come with responsibilities, with character, with trustworthiness." Sophia met his gaze directly. "You've demonstrated none of those qualities." "People change," he insisted. "Finding out about the baby, it changed everything for me." "Did it?" Sophia asked skeptically. "Or are you just panicking because, for once in your life, you can't control the outcome? You can't bully or buy your way into getting what you want?" David's expression hardened. "You think you've won, don't you? With Harrison and his father backing you, but this isn't over." "It was over the moment you decided I was worthless because I couldn't give you a child," Sophia said quietly. Ironic, isn't it? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I made mistakes, terrible ones. But that's my child, Sophia, my flesh and blood. Biology isn't destiny. David, this baby will have everything she needs: love, security, respect without your toxic influence. She, David seized on the pronoun. I'm having a daughter. Sophia cursed her slip. You're not having anything. I'm having a daughter. Our daughter, David corrected, a new intensity in his eyes. I have a right to know her, to be her father. Being a father is more than DNA, Sophia replied. It's showing up every day. It's putting someone else's needs before your own. It's modeling integrity and kindness. She shook her head. You've never done any of those things. Let me try, David pleaded, his voice dropping to a whisper. Please, Sophia. I'll sign whatever agreement you want. Pay whatever you ask. Just don't cut me out of her life completely. For a brief moment, Sophia glimpsed genuine emotion in his eyes, perhaps the first honest feeling she'd seen from him in years. But then she remembered the night he'd thrown her out in the rain, the cruel words, the public humiliation. The memories hardened her resolve. The agreement stands as presented, she said firmly. Sign it within the timeline specified, or face the consequences. Those are your only options. David's face darkened. You've become cold, Sophia. The woman I married would never be this vindictive. The woman you married was a fiction you created, Sophia replied. Someone who diminished herself to accommodate your ego, who silenced her own ambitions to serve yours. She straightened, one hand resting on her belly. That woman is gone. You destroyed her. This is who I really am. Sophia. Goodbye, David. She turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. If you ever show up at my workplace again, or attempt to contact me directly, I'll file for a restraining order. All communication goes through our attorneys from now on. As she walked away, she heard him call after her, his voice tinged with desperation. This isn't over. Sophia, that's my daughter too. She didn't look back. In the elevator, Sophia finally allowed herself to tremble, the adrenaline of the confrontation catching up to her. By the time she reached her floor, Michael was waiting, concern etched on his face. Are you okay? He asked, guiding her to a quiet corner. What happened? He's desperate, Sophia said, her voice steadier than she felt. And when David gets desperate, he becomes dangerous. Did he threaten you? Not explicitly, but he's not going to sign the agreement. Michael, he's fixated on the baby now, especially since he knows it's a girl. Michael's expression darkened. Then we move to plan B. Sophia nodded. Yes, it's time. Later that evening, in the safety of Michael's apartment, they reviewed the strategy with William Harrison and Meridian's legal team. The evidence against David, recordings, financial documents, witness statements, was assembled into a comprehensive file. Once we initiate legal proceedings, there's no going back, the head lawyer cautioned. This will become public very quickly. I understand, Sophia said, her decision made. David responds only to power and consequences. It's time he experienced both. William Harrison studied her with newfound respect. You've built a strong case, but are you prepared for the scrutiny this will bring, the media attention? I've been preparing for months, Sophia replied. I'm ready. As the lawyers departed, William lingered. My son thinks very highly of you, Sophia, as do I. The older man's gaze was penetrating. You would have made a formidable CEO in your own right, had life taken a different turn. Haha, who says it won't? Sophia replied with a small smile. William's answering smile was approving. Indeed. He glanced at Michael, then back to Sophia. For what it's worth, I believe you're making the right decision for yourself and for my granddaughter. After he left, Michael joined Sophia on the sofa, pulling her close. Are you really okay with all of this? Sophia leaned into his embrace, feeling the solid warmth of him. I spent years being afraid of David, his moods, his disapproval, his cruelty disguised as high standards. I won't live in fear anymore, and I won't let my daughter grow up in his shadow. Michael placed a gentle hand on her belly. She's lucky to have you as her mother. And you as her. Sophia hesitated, unsure how to define Michael's role. As whatever she needs me to be, Michael finished simply. Whatever you both need. Sophia felt her daughter kick against Michael's palm, as if in agreement, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future filled with joy rather than anxiety, with love rather than fear. Tomorrow would bring its challenges. David would fight. The media would circulate. Lawyers would posture. Accusations would fly. But tonight, in this moment, Sophia was at peace with her decision. She had found her strength, her voice, and her worth. And nothing, not David, not his money, not his power could take that from her again.